Early childhood is a time of forming an initial sense of self, a self concept or idea of who we are, what we are capable of doing, and how we think and feel is a social process that involves taking into consideration how others view us. Children expand their social horizon beyond parents to include peers. Children's interactions become more wide ranging. They begin to learn about the social roles they are expected to play. Among the first social roles children learn are associated with gender, how society expects boys and girls to behave. This lecture is divided into four main sections: emotional development, play, challenges for caregivers, and harm to children. A tremendous amount of social and emotional development takes place during early childhood. As kids experience temper tantrums, mood swings, and an expanding social world, they must learn more about their emotions, as well as those of other people. Emotional regulation, or effortful control, refers to the ability to control when and how emotions are expressed. It's a preeminent psychological task between 2 and 6 years of age. Self-concept is developed within this process. Emotional regulation influences maturation, learning, family, and culture. Effortful control, executive function, and emotional regulation are similar constructs with much overlap, at least in theory. Executive function emphasizes cognition. Effortful control emphasizes temperament. Both undergird emotional regulation. Many neurological processes underlie these abilities and all advance during early childhood. Brain maturation in this period is evidenced by specific neurological advances: the growth of the prefrontal cortex at about age 4 or 5, myelination of the limbic system, improved behaviors and abilities emerge, there's a longer attention span, and there's an improved capacity for self-control. Erickson's third psychosocial crisis emerges during this developmental period: initiative versus guilt. Children undertake new skills and activities and feel guilty when they do not succeed at them. Fortunately, they possess protective optimism, which encourages trying new things. Preschoolers predict that they can solve impossible puzzles, remember long lists of words, and control their dreams. Protective optimism helps them try new things. This optimistic self-concept protects young children from guilt and shame and encourages learning. The trust and autonomy of previous stages develop into a desire to take initiative or to think of things and initiative action. Children may want to build a fort with the cushions from the living room couch, or open a lemonade stand in the driveway, or make a zoo with their stuffed animals and issue tickets to those who want to come. Or they may just want to get themselves ready for bed without any assistance. To reinforce taking initiative, caregivers should offer praise for the child's efforts and avoid being critical of messes or mistakes. Soggy wash rags and toothpaste left in the sink pales in comparison to the smiling face of a 5-year-old that emerges from the bathroom with clean teeth and pajamas. Emotional regulation and cognitive maturation develop together, each enabling the other to advance. So maturation matters. Learning also matters, and culture matters. Different goals for emotional regulation seem to be important in certain cultures. For example, in the United States, the goal is overcoming fear. In Puerto Rico, modifying anger. In China, tempering pride. In Japan, to control aggression. And in Native American communities, be patient and cooperative. Psychologists have found that the quality of experience and performance can be very different depending on the type of motivation driving such an action. Motivation propels action and is derived from personal or social context. There are two types of motivation. Intrinsic motivation refers to a drive or reason to pursue a goal that comes from inside a person. It is apparent in intrinsic joy, invented dialogues, and imaginary friends. The other type is extrinsic motivation. It is a drive or reason to pursue a goal that arises from the need to have achievements rewarded from the outside. The distinction between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation is crucial in understanding how and when to praise something the child has done. Are they doing it for the external reward or because it is intrinsically satisfying? This means to consider the extent to which praise leads children to perceive their engagement with a task to be part of a positive self-identity, rather than simply to receive a reward through extrinsic motivation. The effectiveness of praise is tied to not being excessive. Praise that reduces perceived autonomy and highlights external reasons for task engagement may undermine intrinsic motivation and may create a dependency on praise such that the absence of praise signifies failure to the child. Parents need to be careful, as praise can become an extrinsic reward. According to psychologist Thomas Gordon, children who are subjected to frequent praise learn to select only those things they think will please their parents and avoid doing those things that may not. While to some parents this may seem very desirable, we know that such children are much less apt to be innovative, creative, and self-directing. They learn to conform rather than innovate, and to follow a pattern known to bring praise rather than to experiment with something new. The next section of the lecture takes a look at play, the most productive and enjoyable activity that children undertake. Play is universal. It has occurred for many thousands of years, and it has been reported in every part of the world. Vygotsky saw play as crucial as it makes children a head taller than their actual height. Play is essential to development because it contributes to the cognitive, physical, social, and emotional well-being of children. Play also offers an ideal opportunity for parents to engage fully with their children. By engaging in negotiation during play, we build connections in the brain's executive control center, which helps to regulate emotions, make plans, and solve problems. This kind of brain development is important to success in school and in life. Play connects children with their imagination and their social world. Development can be seen in the playmates children have. Young children play best with peers. Most infant play is solitary or with a parent. Toddlers are slowly becoming better playmates, and young children play best with peers. Peers provide an audience, role models, and sometimes competition. As children grow older, play becomes more social, influenced by brain maturation, playmate availability, and the physical setting. Parton identified several types of play. Solitary play, where a child plays alone, unaware of any other children playing nearby. Onlooker play, a child watches other children play. Parallel play, children play with similar toys in similar ways, but not together. Associative play, where children interact, observing each other and sharing material, but their play is not yet mutual and reciprocal. Cooperative play is where children play together, creating and elaborating on a joint activity or taking turns. Research on contemporary children finds much more variation than Parton did, perhaps because family size is smaller, and parents invest heavily in each child, rarely telling them to go out and play and come back when it's dark. Play with peers is one of the most important areas in which children develop positive social skills. There are two general kinds of play, solitary and social, and the form of play changes with age, cohort, and culture. The goal of social play, cooperation, is shown by these two boys who at ages 8 and 11 are long past the associative, self-absorbed play of younger children. Note the wide-open mouths of laughter over a shared video game. A major accomplishment. Rough and tumble play is significant in social skill development. It provides opportunities for children to learn to read peers' body language and facial expressions. Boys may not always feel comfortable hugging each other or saying things like, "I like you," but allowing for physical toughness and friendship building through the rough and tumble play gives them the opportunity to express these emotions. Rough and tumble play mimics aggression through wrestling, chasing, or hitting with no intention to harm. It contains expressions and gestures signifying that the child is just pretending. It is particularly common among young males, and it advances children's social understanding, but also increases the likelihood of injury. and it may positively affect limbic system development. Sociodramatic play allows children to act out various roles and themes in stories that they create. Sociodramatic play enables children to explore and rehearse social roles, test their ability to explain, practice regulating their emotions, and develop a self-concept. Children learn to explore and rehearse social roles, explain their ideas, and persuade playmates, practice emotional regulation by pretending to be afraid, angry, brave, and so on, and develop a self-concept in a non-threatening context. It allows children to advance their theory of mind. It should be clear by now that children learn by playing. 50 years ago, the average child spent 3 hours a day in outdoor play. Video games and television have largely replaced that, especially in cities. Children seem safer if parents can keep an eye on them, but what are they learning? The long-term effects on brain and body may be dangerous. Pediatricians, psychologists, and teachers all report extensive research that screen time reduces conversation, imagination, and outdoor activity. The American Academy of Pediatrics suggests that supervision prevents viewing violent or sexual media and avoiding racist and sexist stereotypes. However, many young children watch more than recommended, unsupervised, not only in the United States, but also in other nations. In this section, we'll discuss some challenges that face caregivers of children in this developmental period. We know there are various styles of caregiving. Parenting styles vary within nations, ethnic groups, neighborhoods, and even within families. Baumrein's research identified some categories, and that was based on how parents differ on 4 important dimensions. Number 1, expressions of warmth, from very affectionate to cold and critical. Number 2, strategies for discipline. Parents vary in whether and how they explain, criticize, persuade, ignore, and punish. Number 3, communication. Some parents listen patiently to their children. Others demand silence. Number 4, expectations for maturity. Parents vary in the standards they set for their children regarding responsibility and self-control. On the basis of these dimensions, 3 parenting styles were identified. A 4th style was suggested by other researchers. Here are the parenting styles that were identified: authoritarian parenting, permissive parenting, authoritative parenting, and neglectful, uninvolved parenting. And I refer you to the text for the specific definitions. Now, long-term effects of parenting styles have been reported in many nations. Cultural and regional differences are apparent, but everywhere, authoritative parenting seems to be best. Culture powerfully affects caregiving style. The difference is apparent in multi-ethnic nations. Differences between majority and minority U.S. families should not be exaggerated, though. Parents of all groups usually show warmth to their children. Harsh, cold parenting appears harmful in every group. One challenge for some caregivers is whether to spank or not. Physical punishment increases obedience temporarily, but increases the possibility of later aggression, bullying, and abusive adolescent and adult behaviors. Children who are not spanked are more likely to develop self-control. Cultural influence, background, and context are notable across the U.S. and the world. Some researchers believe that physical punishment is harmless, and some do not. Spanking opinions are influenced by past experience and cultural norms. Research has shown us that spanking is more frequent in the southern United States than in New England, among conservative Christians than among non-religious families, among African Americans than among European Americans, among European Americans than among Asian Americans, among U.S.-born Hispanics than among immigrant Hispanics, in low SES families than in high SES families. Now, these are general trends, and do not stereotype, please. Contrary to these generalizations, some African American mothers living in the South never spank, and some secular European American high SES fathers in New England routinely do. Local norms matter, but individual parents make their own decisions. And the question I would pose is, what is being taught by spanking? The text identifies several alternatives to spanking. One is psychological control, a disciplinary technique that involves threatening to withdraw love and support, and that relies on a child's feelings of guilt and gratitude to the parents. Obviously, this technique has its problems. Timeout is a disciplinary technique in which a child is separated from other people and activities for a specified time. Timeout is not to be done in anger or for too long. It is recommended that parents use a calm voice and that the timeout last only 1 to 5 minutes. Now, timeout is favored by many experts. However, others do not agree. They conclude that misbehavior is motivated by wanting to escape from the situation, and timeout reinforces the misbehavior. Another technique is induction, a disciplinary technique in which the parent tries to get the child to understand why a certain behavior was wrong. Listening, not lecturing, is crucial. It is sometimes combined with a timeout. Ideally, a strong, affectionate parent-child relationship allows children to express their emotions and parents to listen. An important dimension of the self is the sense of self as male or female. Gender roles, or the rights and expectations that are associated with being male or female, are learned throughout childhood and into adulthood. Sex differences are biological differences between males and females in organs, hormones, and body shape. On the other hand, gender differences are differences in male and female roles, behaviors, clothes, and so on, that arise from society, not biology. Children who identify as transgender present parents with special challenges. Recent research suggests that most adults thought parents should encourage their children to play with toys associated with the other sex. There are several theories of gender role development. The first one is a psychoanalytic theory. Freud believed that masculinity and femininity were learned during the phallic stage of psychosexual development. During the phallic stage, the child develops an attraction to the opposite-sexed parent, but after recognizing that the parent is unavailable, learns to model their own behavior after the same-sexed parent. The child develops his or her own sense of masculinity or femininity from this resolution. And according to Freud, a person who does not exhibit gender-appropriate behavior, such as a woman who competes with men for jobs, or a man who lacks self-assurance and dominance, has not successfully completed this stage of development. Consequently, such a person continues to struggle with his or her own gender identity, according to Sigmund Freud. Behaviorism provides another theory of gender role development. Gender differences are a product of ongoing reinforcement and punishment and are learned through all roles, values, and morals. Gender appropriate behavior is rewarded more frequently than what is socially considered gender inappropriate behavior. Social learning theory, an extension of behaviorism, says children notice the ways that men and women behave and internalize the standards they observe. Behaviorists suggest that gender role socialization is a result of the ways in which parents, teachers, friends, schools, religious institutions, media, and others send messages about what is acceptable or desirable behavior as males or females. This socialization begins early. In fact, it may even begin the moment a parent learns that a child is on the way. Knowing the sex of the child can conjure up images of the child's behavior, appearance, and potential on the part of the parent. And this stereotyping can continue to guide perception through life. Cognitive theories offer an alternative explanation for the strong gender identity that becomes apparent at about age 5. It purports that children develop a gender schema, a child's cognitive concept or general belief about sex differences, and it's based on his or her observations and experiences. Young children categorize themselves and everyone else as either male or female, and then think and behave accordingly. The evolutionary theory of gender role development is controversial to some. As the evolutionary approach is a biological one, it suggests that aspects of human behavior have been coded by our genes. because they were or are adaptive. The evolutionary approach argues that gender role division appears as an adaptation to the challenges faced by ancestral humans. The mind is therefore equipped with instincts that enabled our ancestors to survive and reproduce. The two sexes developed different strategies to ensure their survival and reproductive success. This explains why men and women differ psychologically and tend to occupy different social roles. Now, sexual attraction in evolutionary theory is crucial for a basic urge to reproduce. So males and females try to look attractive to the other sex in gendered ways. And consequently, young boys and girls practice becoming attractive to the other sex. Another challenge for caregivers is teaching right from wrong. A sense of right and wrong is an outgrowth of bonding, attachment, and cognitive maturation. Protecting, cooperating, and sacrificing are part of species survival, so there's a piece of evolutionary theory in there. Innate moral impulses are strengthened through cognitive advances and peer interactions. Around age 2, children start to feel moral emotions and understand at least somewhat the difference between what's right and what's wrong. Toddlers and preschoolers are motivated by the threat of consequences. Therefore, early on in their moral development, you might see that they're more concerned about being punished rather than the feelings of another person. The child might also start to show signs of empathy if he or she sees another child who is upset. But empathy doesn't often develop until closer to age 4 or 5. It's important to praise a child for pro-social behavior. Pro-social behavior is extending helpfulness and kindness without any obvious benefit to oneself, and it increases with maturity. Antisocial actions are on the other side of the coin, and they involve deliberately hurting another person, including people who have done no harm, and this declines with maturity. Antisocial actions involve the general types of aggression shown here. Instrumental aggression involves hurtful behavior that is intended to get something that another person has and to keep it. Reactive aggression is an impulsive retaliation for another person's intentional or accidental action, verbal or physical. Relational aggression involves non-physical acts such as insults or social rejection aimed at harming the social connection between the victim and other people. Bullying aggression involves unprovoked, repeated physical or verbal attack, especially on victims who are unlikely to defend themselves. All forms of aggression usually become less common from ages 2 to 6 as the brain matures and empathy increases. Children learn to use aggression selectively, and that decreases both victimization and aggression. Unfortunately, children in this developmental period are susceptible to injury. The term injury control or harm reduction refers to reducing the potential negative consequences of behavior. Instead of using the term accident prevention, public health experts prefer injury control or harm reduction. Injury control suggests that the impact of an injury can be limited, and harm reduction implies that the harm can be minimized. More children are harmed by deliberate or accidental violence than any specific disease, especially for 2 to 6-year-olds. Now, why are young children so vulnerable? Well, it involves impulsivity and the immaturity of the prefrontal cortex. Unlike infants, their motor skills allow them to run, leap, scramble, and grab things in a flash before a caregiver can stop them. Child maltreatment now refers to intentional harm to or avoidable endangerment of anyone under 18 years of age. It is neither rare nor sudden, and most often involves one or both parents. States have adopted strategies to prevent child maltreatment before it occurs, such as connecting new parents to community support opportunities, enabling access to high-quality child care, and coordinating funding. At least 24 states have enacted legislation related to early childhood home visiting programs, one of the effective strategies to support new parents and help prevent child maltreatment. At its core, any type of abuse of children constitutes an exploitation of the child's dependence on and attachment to the parent. Some definitions you should be familiar with. Child abuse involves a deliberate action that is harmful to a child's physical, emotional, or sexual well-being. Child neglect is failure to meet a child's basic physical, educational, or emotional needs. Child abuse can be thought of as an act of commission, where child neglect is an act of omission. Substantiated maltreatment is harm or endangerment that has been reported, investigated, and verified. Reported maltreatment is harm or endangerment about which someone has notified the authorities. The symptoms of maltreated children coincide with PTSD. Some maltreated children suffer from PTSD with signs of neurological, emotional, and behavioral damage. Childhood abuse scars not just the brain and body, but according to the latest research, may leave its mark on genes as well. The trauma of abuse induces a cascade of effects, including changes in hormones and neurotransmitters that mediate development of vulnerable brain regions. Studies have shown abuse before age 18, when the brain is still rapidly developing, has a greater impact on limbic irritability than later abuse. Child abuse may alter the development of the left hippocampus permanently, and in doing so cause deficits in verbal memory and dissociative symptoms that persist into adulthood. Childhood abuse is associated with diminished right-left hemisphere integration, or some deficiency in the primary pathway connecting the two hemispheres, the corpus callosum. The consequences of maltreatment are devastating and long-lasting. Mistreated and neglected children regard people as hostile and exploitative, are less friendly, more aggressive, and more isolated than other children, experience greater social deficits, and may experience large and enduring economic consequences. The text identifies 3 levels of prevention. In primary prevention, the overall conditions are structured to make harm less likely. Laws and customs are crucial to reduce injury for people of every age. Secondary prevention is more targeted, averting harm in high-risk situations for vulnerable individuals. Tertiary prevention begins after an injury has already occurred, limiting damage. All levels of prevention require helping caregivers to provide a safe, nurturing, and stable home. When a child is removed from home and entrusted to another adult or adults, that is called foster care. Kinship care is a form of foster care in which a relative, usually a grandmother, becomes the approved caregiver. Foster care is sometimes informal or may result from child protective services. Sometimes the best plan is adoption by another family. Now, some adoption difficulties occur. Judges and biological parents are reluctant to release children for adoption. Most adoptive parents prefer infants. Some agencies screen out families not headed by heterosexual couples. Some professionals insist that adoptive parents be of the same ethnicity and/or religion as the child.